Let's take a look at Root. This is kind of a weird game. The first I heard of it was down at the store, where I was told it's like furry coin. Okay. It isn't really, but it's 4 factions, there's cards. The factions are completely asymmetrical. So in a way it is, and it's not so much furries as these cute little forest animals. There's already one expansion out, another one on Kickstarter. I have not picked up any of the expansions. The only reason I got it, I saw it played once. It looked kind of interesting. And I said, I'm kind of intrigued by it, but whatever. I'd like to get a chance to play it first. I saw it about the time when it was when I wasn't getting into games at the store very often. I dropped down, and there wouldn't have been a seat for me anyhow. But I managed. It showed up on Amazon, I think, on sale for an amount that, like, well, that's not a bad price. I can do that to give it a shot. And I thought my wife would be very, very interested in it, mainly because of the cuteness factor. It really, really has that. And to some extent, it's kind of worded as the game that, is to sort of try to induce newer, younger players into wargaming, maybe, because it uses some wargaming-ish mechanisms in it. I'm not really sure how much it fits that, but it wouldn't be that big a leap from this to coin. In fact, this might be more complex than coin in some ways, at least in the more simpler coin games. Then I convinced my wife to give it a shot, and we played it, and she was into the cuteness factor of it, definitely, and respects it as a game, but didn't really like the kind of thinking involved in it. It's a little, I'm not going to say just too much wargaming, but too much about area domination and stuff like that. You can see, if you're used to my intros and stuff, usually I have things more set up than this, and you're probably thinking, everybody comes onto the map. No, there's a lot of setup, but the setup is controlled by the players, and it's based on the cards that they draw. And I didn't want to go through all that beforehand. Now, if you're not used to my videos, chances are you probably want to turn this one off at this point, because what I'm going to do is work my way through the rule book. And, other people like things to be taught in a somewhat different fashion. I don't do that. There are probably plenty of people who are more experienced with the game than I am. I've played it once, 2-player, and are used to teaching games to their groups in different ways. However, if you just stick for the ride, you'll see, maybe things that you're not used to in an introduction, like, gee, that's strange that they're doing that, and comments like that. I do encourage people to watch the playthrough, even though it's not going to be particularly competent play. It's an exploration of the game always, and it is solo, but without solo roles. I'll be playing all 4 sides, but it is that is actually, to me, the centerpiece of what I'm doing, is trying to share what's going on in the game, and you don't have to watch every minute of it. Sometimes there's little points where things get more interesting. Okay. Anyway, there's a bunch of... The one thing is, there's basically 3 ways to learn this game. There's a conventional wargaming type rulebook, which I didn't find... It's more complete. There are things that are not covered in any other way to learn the game, in terms of some of the faction capabilities and what they actually mean in drawing everything out. But it's dry, and dry to the point that, it would be kind of disturbing. Then there's learning to play, which reminds me of the old Tim Jim Let's Play with a sheet of paper that gave most of the rules, sort of. This actually is pretty damn good. It can't go into every single detail, but it can give you the basics of the game in a very, very good level. And then finally, included in this, there are components that let you walk through a turn or two, I don't know how much, I think, of play, and then get started that way, so that you don't make any really stupid mistakes, which I'm certain to make. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the components. I don't know all of them. For example, I'm not sure these cards and these cards, which are specific to the raccoon, the Vagabond character, I don't know exactly what those do. I do know what everything else does, except the walkthrough. There's a main deck of cards, which has 4 special cards in it, which are sort of game-changing goal cards, where you can exchange your normal victory conditions for one of those. These are special to the bird player. There's a bunch of little info cards that tell you what each of the different character or players is about, which is sort of a quick summary of some of the information that's on here. And it's actually even useful if you are that player to kind of get a feeling. It tells you what that player is kind of trying to do towards victory. There's some overview. There's some of the setup stuff for the playthrough, and I think that's it. What there is not. What there is not is a sequence of play, and that's because each player has their own special sequence of play listed on here. Not everyone has the same one. In fact, I think no one has duplicate ones, because it is very, very asymmetrical in terms of what your capabilities are, etc. And that goes through these. We'll touch on that as we hit the rules. For the board itself, the other side of the board has a winter scene on it, which has some slightly different rules, one of which is these little critters are randomized on it, and that's what these pieces are for. The players each have a set of little pieces that are their wires, and then some extraneous pieces. So for example, for the cat, they have a bunch of different buildings, and they have wood that they work with. For the bird, they have their eyries. These are sympathy pieces, I think they're called, or something like that. Raised fist of sympathy. That's what it basically is. And then the Vagabond actually has this, but he's interested in these guys, which are objects. He's the only one who can really use objects. The other players build those objects, and you can see some of them are up here as well. Those are specific to the ruins, and since I've never played it with the Vagabond, I'm not actually sure how the ruins work. We'll have to see that as we start working our way through the rules. Like I said, each player has their own player aid card, and that'll indicate how they get their victory points. So for example, the cat gets theirs through buildings. The Woodland Alliance gets it through collecting sympathy. I have no clue. He's trying to make deals with people. I don't see anything that generates victory points right on there, so we'll have to look at him more carefully. And the birds get them through their roosts. The birds get their victory points every turn. I don't know about the Woodland Alliance. The cat gets their victory points for every building they build. So if you destroy buildings, you can rebuild them and get those points back. But if you take a quick look at this, they want to be building their highest number buildings. Of course, that may mean you don't want to destroy if they have all their buildings out of a certain type. And then, you know, if you can keep them small enough, they're only getting a couple of victory points for building buildings. If they get up to the high level, though, destroying their buildings gives them an opportunity to build more high-valued buildings, which may not be to your advantage. Okay. The concept of the 4 different characters, I still haven't touched the board yet, but the concept of the 4 different characters, the cat is sort of the established rulers of the area currently. However, they're kind of upstarts. The birds are the ancient rulers of the forest, and they're trying to retake their territory. The Woodland Alliances, the poor oppressed critters, like foxes who are always oppressed, right, of the forest, and they're going to try to be doing some sort of communist uprising or something like that. And the Vagabond, if you're looking in coin terms, this is sort of the criminal element. This is a guy who's going around cutting deals with everyone, trying to get things produced, and God knows what his actual victory conditions are. There we go. Here's one. He likes to give cards to friendly factions. He gets them from fighting, which everyone kind of does. And he gets them for going on quests. Okay. The board itself is set up out of a bunch of clearings, which are connected by paths. You can ignore the river. It doesn't mean anything except with an expansion, or on the winter side, it has an effect as well. Why does running water not have an effect? Don't worry about it. The different clearings can be moved to by most of the players along the paths, and only that way. However, the Vagabond is able to wander around in forests, and he doesn't have to travel along paths, which is important. Each of the clearings has a number of building spaces on it, some of which may be in ruin, which means they can't be built on until the Vagabond explores the ruins. And they have a critter type. There are, I think, only 3 critter types, which is the foxes, the mouses, and the rabbits. Those are impacted, or impact, or something, by the cards, which also have 4 suits, which match the 3 on here, and then there's birds. Birds are always wild, which means that you can use a bird card in order to act like it's any of the other suits. The other suits are here. And basically, you'll often be matching the suit on the card to a clearing in order to be able to do something. All right. Let's take a look at the rules. Setup is largely fashioned here. You shuffle together all the cards from here. You pick your player groups. You get dealt a hand of cards, and then you get to do your setup. And that's why I haven't done setup yet. Okay, for moving, like I said, you generally move from clearing to clearing. However, in order to do this, you have to rule, i.e. have kind of the majority of the pieces in either the clearing that you're leaving or the clearing that you're entering. And this creates a sort of a World War I-ish type mechanism. Trying to think, Al-Nafi's The Great War has something similar to this, where you can move between areas that you control, but if you're, kind of, it's a little different mechanism, and I don't want to go into that. But basically, it does prevent you from making blitzes deep into enemy territory, if there's such a thing in the game. All right. Most of the cards also have a little something on the bottom. Now, in this case, this is an ambush card. It's a special kind of card that doesn't have that. I seem to be really good at picking the wrong card at any given time. This will have an immediate effect where you can play it from your hand to do that. But here's one. You can build this. It's called Armorers. You're going to need little red foxes to build it. However your particular group builds things, you can build this as long as you have Fox production. And in order to do it, you get, in this case, a capability where you can use this particular card once in order to avoid an event, once it's built. Some of them give continuing effects. Others, like this will cost you 2 foxes, it'll allow you to produce a knife, and then you'll get 2 victory points. And then it gets discarded and it's available for more. The only way you can build the knife is if there's one available to be built. And thus the only way to get the victory points for it. All right. These are core concepts. Again, each of the players has their own take on this. But one of the core concepts is the idea of battling. When you want to fight, you have to have pieces in the same clearing as someone else. You declare that you attack them, and you roll a pair of dice. The higher number on the die is how much damage the attacker does to the defender. And the lower number is how much the defender does to the attacker. There are modifiers to those numbers, and those numbers are limited by the number of warriors you have in the space. So, if the attacker had at least 2 pieces, he would do 2 points of damage. These dice look like 12-siders, but they range from 0 to 3. That was something which kind of shocked me. I moved a bunch of pieces in thinking, I'm going to kick butt here. It doesn't really behoove you to throw a lot of pieces in because that die roll is limited to a 3. But there's a concept called, whenever you kill an enemy building or token, that's not warriors, that's these pieces like this, you get a victory point. This is by any means. Like if you play a card that removes one or whatever, you get victory points for it. Okay. Now, some of the effects that you have in play will allow you to do extra hits, and those follow the rule of that effect. So for example, if you had +2 extra hits and you rolled a 2 and had 2 critters, you would do 4 hits total, not limited by the number of critters. In fact, you might be able to do damage. You have to have something there, but you might be able to do damage without warriors. Your buildings can do damage. Okay, remember that ambush card? The deal with that is the defender's allowed to slap one of those down in a clearing whose suit matches the card, and remember, bird cards are wild, at the declaration of battle to cause an immediate 2 hits. That'll kill 2 warriors. That could conceivably end the battle because the attacker no longer has any capability to do damage. Now, they can be canceled out by the opposing player playing a matching ambush card. I'm not sure what matching means. I think it means matching the suit of the clearing, as opposed to matching the exact card, which means a bird can be wild for either player and does not only have to be matched by a bird. But that's something I would have to check in the core rulebook. They don't make that kind of distinguishment in this one. Okay. Like I said, each of the different characters has their own special rules. I'm going to have to pause here to swap batteries, so I'll do that. On to the simplest of the characters. They kind of go in order of simplicity, I guess. All right. For the Marquise de Cat, he has a special keep piece that'll start in one of the corners. I believe it is a building. The keep is going to allow him to do 2 things. One is no one else can place pieces on the board. Don't move into, just place pieces into the board where the keep is. And also, anytime the Marquis loses warriors, he can play cards matching the clearing that the warriors were lost in to bring them back to life immediately back at the keep, which is his hospitals. Okay. The turns for all the players are broken into 3 sets: birdsong, daylight, and evening. Let's see, like that. Okay. The cat has a very simple birdsong. Each of his sawmills, these little, will create a wood token. He has like 8 wood tokens. He's limited by countermix. So he's going to want to use some of these, or else he'll just keep collecting them until he can't collect no more. Daylight's going to be the main portion of each player's turn. Special rule here. He normally gets to take 3 actions. However, after taking his 3 actions, he can spend a bird card to get an extra action. He can do that as many times as he wants. His actions are battle, start a battle, march, make 2 moves. That can be the same group moving 2 spaces, but generally, well, a move is basically you collect as many warriors as you want from a space and move to a legal space that follows a path. He could do that twice in a row. He could also do some other things. Now, he must do this exactly, which is kind of interesting because you can't pass on a move or something like that. Recruit. He's got recruiter pieces. I don't know what the symbol for that is. That's these handshakes. For every recruit piece that he has on the board, he'll get a new warrior there. And he's only allowed to do this once each turn. He can do a build action. He can put 1 building in a clearing that he rules. Ruling is defined a little earlier. Let's get that because that's important in a number of places here. You rule a clearing if you have the most combined warriors and buildings there. But if you're tied, no one has a rule there. So we go back to the cat, and that's a general rule, the ruler's ruling. He can place 1 building in a single clearing he rules with an open slot, i.e. one of these squares that's available, by spending wood tokens equal to the cost. The cost will be layered by how many buildings you have. So if you have no sawmills, it'll cost you nothing to build one except the action. But otherwise, you have to start paying wood. The wood that you pay has to be able to make it to the clearing that you're building in through a path of clearings that you own. And you'll immediately get victory points equal to that building's victory point total. You can also overwork. You can spend a card of any kind, matching the clearing suit where you have a sawmill and you get an extra wood. And in general, you're allowed to do things in any order unless they say otherwise. Okay. And then in the evening, you'll get 1 card drawn from the deck. Plus, for each one of these, you get an extra card. And then if you happen to have more than 5 cards in your hand, you have to discard some. Is that all the rules for him? No, he's got his victory conditions. Well, victory conditions are basically to break 30 unless things change. Okay, the Eyrie Dynasties, the Boyds. If they tie for presence in a clearing, they rule it. However, they have disdain for trade, which means when they craft items, they're limited to only 1 victory point in general. Now, their birdsong ability, or action, is that they take from their hand 1 or 2 cards and program them up here into actions. Those are actions they're going to have to do for a while until their whole government collapses. You have to add cards every turn. So you will have more and more actions that you take the longer your particular ruler stays in power. But eventually he is going to collapse because you won't be able to do all your actions. If you have no cards at the start of your bird song, you draw one, because you must add a card every time. You can't try to engineer not having a card. If you have no roosts on the board, you get to place a roost and 3 warriors in whatever clearing there is that has the fewest warriors. I think that's total warriors, not just yours. Okay. Now, at the beginning of the game, one of the things you do is you pick your Eyrie leader, who have a special ability listed below, and then they have 2 viziers, which indicate bird cards pre-programmed. So this guy, for example, has a recruit and a move. And that means you'll be doing those actions while he's the leader. Luckily for you, they're bird actions, which means you can do them in any clearing, so they're kind of good for that. Okay. For each card that you have pre-programmed in a column, you have to take an action in that column. So, and you do these in order. Starting from the left and moving to the right. However, whatever's in the column, you can choose to do in whichever order you like. So like, if you have move, you can move to a clearing that you can then move from in order to fulfill your programming. Okay, the first one is recruit. That allows you to place a warrior in a matching clearing with a roost. You have to match the suit to the clearing. You have to have a roost in it. If you're out of warriors, and again, there's a limited number of warriors in the game, if you don't have the right kind of clearing, then you failed and your turn immediately ends and bad things happen. That's the turmoil rules here. That goes with all of these. Move. You must move at least 1 warrior from a matching clearing. So whatever suit it is, that's where you move from, and you're allowed to move into another clearing. And you can take as many warriors as you like from that clearing, but you must move at least 1 for each of your cards again. Battle. For each card in the battle slot, you pick a clearing, and you must attack someone else. No one else in that suit? Too bad, you failed. Finally, build. You must place a roost in a matching clearing that you rule with an open slot and no roost. You can only have 1 roost in each clearing. There has to be open slots wherever you build. You might well find that if you have an action in the build thing that's not a bird, and sometimes even if it is a bird, you're having a hard time fulfilling that one. Just some interesting points. Now remember, there are bird cards in here too. You're not limited to your loyal viziers. All right. Then in evening, you'll score however many victory points for the number of roosts that you have on the board at the end of your turn. That should be at least 1, but 1 only gets you 0. Then you draw 1 card, plus 1 per uncovered draw bonus, and you have a couple of draw bonuses there, and you have to discard down to 5. All right. So what happens if you screw it all up? You go into turmoil. First, your regime is humiliated. You'll lose 1 victory point for every bird card that you have programmed up above. Then your court's purged. Your entire decree gets discarded, except the 2 loyal viziers who will come in with your new leader. Your leader's deposed. He's turned face down and is essentially dead. And you pick a new leader and put him here and program the 2 new loyal viziers. They will be your only cards in the decree. So you go from maybe doing a lot of things to doing just 2 over the course of a turn. Finally, you rest, and you go to evening immediately, just to say you don't finish out your daylight turn at that point. Okay. Now we're on the ones that I have not played. The Woodland Alliance, they're guerrilla warriors. When defending in battle, they get the higher roll. They're better in battle, I guess. As the Alliance, you spend supporters, cards in your supporters stack. Let's take a look at the Woodland Alliance. Okay, so he has a special space for supporters on his. Supporters are separate from your hand of cards, and you can only spend supporters for their suit. For example, you couldn't craft a card in the supporter stack or play an ambush card from there to deal hits, but you can take a card from there in order to use it as a suit card. If you don't have a base on the map, you may only have up to 5 supporters. Discard any excess cards. Okay. Supporters are often spent to place sympathy tokens. Placing sympathy is the main way you score victory points, and sympathy can get you more supporters through outrage. And you can see there's victory points on the sympathy track. Whenever another player removes a sympathy token, and they get a victory point for that, or moves any warriors into a clearing with a sympathy token, they must add a card from their hand matching that clearing to your supporter's stack. If they don't have a matching card, they show you their hand, and then you draw from the deck and randomly add that to the supporter stack, which may mean you get a different suit. Okay, let's look at their different actions. They may revolt any number of times, and then they can spread sympathy any number of times. Sounds like it's sequential. First, the revolt. Spend 2 supporters matching a sympathetic clearing. Remove all enemy pieces there and place a matching base. Okay. Bases are squares. There they are. And they have suits on them as well. These are not bases. It's just these 3. Okay. Then place warriors there equal to the number of sympathetic clearings matching the suit of the revolt clearing, including the revolt clearing itself. And finally, put a warrior in the officer's box. Whenever you remove a base, you'll have to remove half your officers and discard all your supporters matching the suit of that base, even your bird supporters. Ow! So your wild cards all go away anytime you lose a base. Okay, the next thing you can do is spread sympathy. And obviously you can only do this 3 times because there was only 3 bases. So it's not any number. Place a sympathy token in an unsympathetic clearing, adjacent to a sympathetic clearing if possible. You must spend supporters as shown by the cost on the sympathy track, 1, 2, or 3. If the target clearing has 3 or more warriors of another player, you have to spend another matching supporter to place your sympathy there. Okay. Then we go to daylight. Looks simpler. Unlike in Birdsong, these come from your hand and not your supporters. So in Birdsong, you can play cards from your supporters. Must they? Yes, they must come from your supporters cards. So you can't use hand. But these you must use from your hand. You can craft a card, but you can use sympathy tokens to craft a card. I'm guessing, like with the cat, if you have a sympathy token in the proper section, that allows you to do crafting. You can mobilize. That just adds the card to the supporter stack. That's pretty easy. And you can train. You can spend a card whose suit matches a built base to place a warrior in the officer's box. This warrior is now an officer. The officers will be the number of military operations you can take during the evening. Without officers, you can't move or battle with your warriors. Training officers will let you recruit new warriors and place sympathy tokens without spending supporters. All right, let's see what evening does. You can take a number of military operations equal to the number of officers, and I guess you can turn them over to indicate that you did. You can move. That allows you to take a move. You can battle. You initiate a battle. Notice these don't cost you cards. They just cost you officer actions. You can recruit. Place a warrior in a clearing with a base. And you can organize. Remove one of your warriors from an unsympathetic clearing to place a sympathy token there. And you'll get the victory points for the sympathy token. So like the cats, you get points for for placing the sympathy token. Okay. After you finish your military operations, you draw 1 card plus 1 per revealed draw bonus, and those are on your bases. And if you have more than 5, you discard down to 5. I'm going to take a little pause since I paused before, and then we'll get to the Vagabond. The final and weirdest of these is the Vagabond. I may have to look in the Law of Root book for this. I didn't have to do it for the birds. I'm pretty sure not everything about them is programmed, is written here. But it may be that this is actually sufficient if you kind of have a feel. Okay. The Vagabond is a lone warrior. He cannot rule a clearing, nor can he stop another player from ruling one, but he's nimble. He can move regardless of who rules his clearing. He has only 1 piece, the Vagabond pawn, which I had kicking around here. Here he is. Such cute pieces. Just everything about this game is cute. Okay, items. He has to manage items. He expands his selection by exploring runes and helping other factions. At any time, an item can be damaged or undamaged, and an undamaged item can be either face up or face down. You can exhaust undamaged items to perform an action. And you do that by turning it face down. You have a damaged space for your items. Okay, while undamaged, tea, coins, and bags are stored on a track on the left side of your faction board. Here's coins and bags. Here's tea. All other items will be sitting in your satchel. You wouldn't want to be carrying, well, you can't carry a bag in a bag. Your money, it wouldn't be safe in a bag. And tea is definitely a terrible thing to go carrying around in your backpack unless you have a screw-on thermos. So that all makes sense. You may not want to carry your sword in your bag either, but you can carry only so many items in your satchel, and you'll have to discard down to your item capacity during the evening. Here it says nothing. Okay. All right. During birdsong, you flip 2 items face up for each tea that you have on your track at the start of birdsong. And then you get 3 more face up, no matter what. Then you can slip once, moving into an adjacent clearing or forest without exhausting any shoes. Okay, so slipping allows you to move from a clearing into a forest. Forests are divided by the tracks. From what I understand, this is all one forest, and it's adjacent to these clearings. It gives you more mobility than most of the players have. Most of the players, and there's sometimes where you're looking and you're saying, wow, I should be able to go here. Nope, you can't. You got some difficult things. This one especially catches me, the ones along the river, because it looks like the river's a road. Nope, only the river folk think it's a road, and they're not in this copy of the game. Okay. That is his birdsong. During daylight, he can move. He exhausts a boot to take a move. This is like a normal move, except that rulership doesn't matter for him. Battle, he can exhaust a sword to initiate a battle. Strike, he can exhaust his crossbow, and there's only 1 crossbow in the game. No, there might be. There's another one here. Okay, there's one in the runes. You can exhaust a crossbow to remove a warrior in your clearing. If a player has no warriors there, you can remove a building or token of that player. Remember, that's worth a victory point. Explore. You can exhaust, I don't know what that is. Looks like a torch. There it is. You can't build those. You can exhaust a torch to take an item from a ruin in your clearing and score 1 victory point. You remove the ruin from the map. Aid. You can exhaust any 1 item and give a card from your hand matching your clearing to any player in your clearing. Then you take an item that they've crafted. Now, when they craft things, they'll be putting them on their board. You're able to trade them a card for one of these items, and items are really valuable to you. Quest. You can claim a quest whose suit matches your clearing by exhausting the 2 items listed on the quest. Okay. Here we go. So here's a quest. It has 2 items, and you get to pick a reward for it. The suit has to match the clearing. You exhaust the 2 items, place the claimed quest in your play area, then you draw 2 cards from the deck, or you can score a victory point per quest of this suit that you've completed, including this one. Finally, draw and put out a new quest. I'm assuming during setup there's at least 1 quest available to you. Still don't know what these are for. They may also be set up. This gives you something special that you can do. And since they all have to do with the torch, the torch has an S, so you have starting pieces also. You can't do anything without pieces, so you'll need them. Okay. Craft. You can exhaust the hammer equal in number to the suits shown on a card's crafting cost. All of your hammers have to match the suit of your clearing. Here's a hammer. You have those available too. So you can build your own items. You can repair. You can exhaust a single hammer to repair a damaged item, and now it's face up in your satchel or wherever. You can do a special action. You can exhaust your torch to do the action listed on your character card. And I think you choose one of these at the beginning, and you're probably just stuck with it. We'll see. Okay. And then in the evening, if you're in the forest, you repair all your damaged items. Then you draw a card, plus 1 card per coin on its track. If you have more than 5 cards, you discard down to 5. Finally, if you have more items in your satchel and damaged box than your item limit, which is 6 plus 2 per bag on its track, you must remove items from your satchel down to your item limit. Return any removed items to the box. They're out of the game. He doesn't uncover draw bonuses. He gets them from his items. Okay. Shifting items. You can freely move face-up undamaged T-coins and bags between your satchel and their tracks. If you exhaust a T-coin or bag, you must move it to your satchel. Since this says freely, it's not limited to evening. It just looks like it's something you can do. If an item is damaged, it goes to your damaged box in your satchel, and I think counts against your satchel. When an item is repaired, it moves out of the damaged box and into the satchel. Okay. You also have a relationships chart up here. This is how friendly or hostile other factions are towards you. You can improve your relationship with a faction by giving them cards with the aid action. During the same turn, you must take the aid action the number of times shown between their current relationship space and the next one. When you improve a relationship, you score the victory points on the new space. When you reach the allied space, you may move and battle with that faction's warriors. This is not covered in here. So, for example, to move from indifferent up to here costs you 1 aid action, which means you give them a card and you take an item from them. And you have to do this in the same turn. And you'd get a victory point for doing that. Let's take a look at what alliances do. Each time you aid an ally, you get 2 victory points. When you move during daylight, you may move warriors from an allied faction with you from the origin clearing to your destination clearing. These will follow normal movement rules for the faction and do not gain the benefit of your nimble special ability. I don't think they have an option. They follow you. Whenever you initiate a battle, you may treat allied warriors of one faction in the clearing of the battle as your own. The maximum hits you can roll equals the number of that ally's warriors there, plus your total undamaged swords. You cannot treat them as your own if the ally is the defender. In a battle where you treat allied warriors as your own, you can take hits by removing allied warriors. However, you must take more hits by removing allied warriors than by damaging items during the same... No, if you take more hits by removing allied warriors than by damaging your items during the same battle, the allied faction becomes hostile. This overrides the condition for becoming hostile later. If you cause outrage by moving or battling with allied warriors, you give the matching card. Outrage is the Woodland folk. Whenever another player removes a sympathy token or moves any warriors into a sympathetic clearing, they must add a card matching. Yeah, so you're responsible. No shit. If you ever remove a warrior of a non-hostile faction, their relationship marker immediately moves to hostile. Now that looks a little different than this, which says if you take more. I'm assuming taking hits with an ally doesn't make them hostile unless you qualify for the special rules there. Whenever you remove a piece of a hostile faction in battle, you get a victory point. This is added to the points scored for enemy buildings and tokens. Do not score points for removing the warrior that made the faction hostile. You must exhaust an extra boot to enter a clearing with any warriors and of any number of hostile factions. You cannot move a relationship marker out of the hostile box by using aid, but you can still aid a hostile faction to take crafted items. You can form a coalition with a hostile faction. If you do so, move their relationship marker to indifferent. We'll see about coalitions. If you ever remove a warrior, place its faction's relationship into the hostile. From now on, you get points for killing them, in addition to any points you score for removing buildings and tokens. However, yeah, so that's already covered in there. Let's keep going. Battling as the Vagabond. You don't have warriors, so your normal battle is a little different. Your pawn's not a warrior, so you can't roll, and you're not affected by the effects that refer to warriors. You can battle where your pawn is. You can only deal a number of hits equal to the number of undamaged swords you have, whether exhausted or not. You can take hits by damaging items of your choice, and if you have no undamaged items, you ignore all further hits. But in that case, you will be defenseless, and you take an extra hit if you have no undamaged. If you have no undamaged daggers, you're defenseless. Okay. I think there was defenseless with other things too. Let me see if that's defined under the battle rules. We skipped a little bit. I seem to remember that being there. It may just be this. No, the attacker deals an extra hit if the defender has no warriors in the clearing of battle, leaving themselves defenseless. So this is the equivalent to that state, but I didn't catch it before. Okay. Dominance card. There are 4 of these dominance cards in the deck, 1 in each suit. Like ambush cards, these cannot be crafted, but they can be spent for their suit. If you discard or spend a dominance card for its suit, it doesn't actually get discarded. It's placed near the map. Any player during the daylight may pick up a dominance card near the map by spending a card of the matching suit. During your daylight, if you have at least 10 victory points, you may play a dominance card in your play area to activate it. Your score marker comes off the board. You won't be winning by getting 30 victory points. You can only win by meeting the victory conditions listed on the active dominance card. This does not cost against your hand size, but you can't remove it from play or replace it ever. Okay. The Vagabond can't rule clearings, but he can play a dominance card to form a coalition with a player other than himself with the lowest score. If there's a tie for lowest score, the Vagabond chooses which player to form a coalition with. When forming a coalition, the Vagabond removes his score marker from the score track and places it on the faction board of that player. Now the Vagabond will win along with that player if they win. Special rules for different number of players. This is basically the 4-player scenario that we'll be playing. There's the winter map, which is a little different. The river will divide the forests up as if it's a path. And because the suits are random, that may cause issues of play balance. That is pretty much it. I don't know how many quests are out at once. That'll be set up, and that'll be in the setup. I'm guessing it's 1. I could look over here. You get 3 of them at the beginning of the game, and some other stuff. And then they mark things down here like what different factors take effect in the game. So for example, the complexity of this is moderate. The others are low, I think. I'm not sure about the Woodland. The Woodland is high complexity. I don't know why that is. This guy seems to have the most complex rules. It may be it may be difficulty of play more than anything else. I'm not sure. Or complexity of the strategies that you have to use. I don't believe the Woodland Alliance has particularly complex rules, to tell you the truth. But maybe I'm missing something. All right, let's send this up, and I'll get started at some point soon. Maybe not today.